game-changing discussions on the big ideas that shape our thinking. This is One2One. Previously on One2One.
We grew up in a very humble place. My parents didn't have a lot, but they wanted us to get an education. So they tried everything. They made a lot of painful sacrifices to ensure that happened. But after my primary school education, there was just no way to keep supporting that. So I had to drop out of school for a number of years. And it was in that time that I saw a chessboard for the first time. But what I didn't know then was that it was going to be the very single moments that would completely change the trajectory of my life.
So your quite innovative intervention in the social landscape of this country has meant, in the last couple of years, perhaps slightly more, that you have had the opportunity to wine and dine in the corridors of power with the high and mighty, with the elite of society. You've come to understand who they are, how they think, how they operate. Can I ask you, Tunde Onakoya, if you feel that your particular background, coming from the slums of Lagos and finding yourself here, has offered you any particular advantages in operating in this realm?
That's a very interesting question. So I was in Dubai recently, and I was invited to speak at a women's leadership conference. And this was a room filled with 700 women that are highly accomplished, very successful. I had to pay a lot of money to be at that conference, And I was there to speak to them. And I just caught myself in the moment that, am I worthy to be in this room, to stand in front of all these people and tell them what to do? What makes me qualified or worthy to stand in front of these people and share anything of value to them? And it really put things into perspective for me, because I live such an interesting duality, in a lot of times, I'm a chess master that travels the world, speaks at those global conferences, inspiring people, sharing the stories and doing this great work. And sometimes when I take off my cap, like when I leave here, I'm going back to our hub, I'm just going to be a teacher to the kids, trying to get them to not make noise, say, okay, let's do this. And to them, I'm not a celebrity. I'm just Uncle Tunde that is their chess teacher. And to exist in this duality, is what gives my life such an interesting, such an exciting meaning, in fact, and that is why I said, a lot of my background has prepared me for moments like this, right? And what I am really is the one who stands in the gap, right? And that is what I think my advantage is now, because of course, a lot of my friends, a lot of the circles I'm in now, the social circles, are people that are millionaires in dollars, very successful, very accomplished. And you begin to see that for a lot of them, they have wealth, but there's no meaning, behind the success that they have, because they don't understand their success as something that should be of service. Which is what my role is to stand on the fine gap between the haves and the have-nots. That I can help the haves understand that the only true success is service. And to become a voice, I can say that I had to create my own success and define my own success, to have the leverage to be able to speak that truth in those rooms, which is what the World Record gave me, right? And to also come to the have-nots, to the children that I serve, to these communities, right? And to help them understand that there's a place for you in this world. And you have to fight for it. And these are the tools that you need to fight for that world. And by bridging that gap, it's you help the haves know that this is what that resource should be used, should be directed towards, right? And the have-nots, to help them see that this is what is possible if you stay the course, right? So it's a very fine place to stand in. And it is because I have seen both sides of the curtain. I believe in extreme poverty. And now I have some privilege and some leverage. right? And not a lot of people have that, right? Because they don't have any basis for it. There are people in their lives that have never known what it means to be hungry before. They're only spoiled of choices, so I don't know what to eat. Meanwhile, there are children that actually starve to death, like starve to death. So it is the inequality that unfortunately exists in our society, and I find myself existing in that gap now, and it's a responsibility I take very seriously. That whatever rooms I'm in, I remind people, empower people of great wealth that yes, congrats, but this is not good success until you do something meaningful with it. And I hope you seeing me here would always be a reminder for you that this is how to use our success in the most meaningful ways. And when we do that, we have a truly prosperous and collective society that we can all be collectively proud of. And earlier this year I was in Harvard, and I was invited to speak to this fellows at the Harvard Graduate School of Design. And I think I was talking to them about hope and I think entropy. And this Graduate School of Design has been in existence for hundreds of years because of an endowment that someone like at least 100 years ago put in place for like a generation of architects that he wanted to go through this program and come out on the other side better in Harvard. And that endowment is still in existence till today. Someone had that kind of foresight, right? And that person died years ago. But look at like 100 years down the line, this is still in existence. What does that really tell us? How do we think about success, for ourselves? How do we, the L is the privilege. So, which is a lot of like what I'm trying to navigate now, which is why I recently designed a chessboard that I'm selling for $1 million each. That's okay, you don't know how to help, but yeah, buy this chessboard. 50% of whatever we make from this chessboard, we're going to use it to build the biggest chess institute in the world. So now you get something back for it. You get to show off to your friends this beautiful and carved at the rare fabric chessboard, but then you've contributed meaningfully. So being able to do that is ways in which, I can sell to the rich, then I can take that and use it to create opportunity for the poor. So that is one expression of it. And I'm still navigating that.
Absolutely. So, Tunde Onakoya, you have come from a world in which, as Dickens said of young Oliver, children are poised undecidedly between this world and the next.
Yeah.
Yet, we've spoken about the elite of society, and I asked the question deliberately, actually, and it's interesting. Quite correctly, actually, that you agree, you describe yourself, as you did earlier, as a part of the elite of society. And for me, that suggests a certain understanding that the things that we are talking about here are measured really in impact and integrity. And no one asks that anyone apologizes for privilege. But understanding the burden and the responsibility of that privilege is the preoccupation of the elite.
Absolutely.
At least ought to be.
Very
Can I
much so.
ask you to press in a bit further on that point and talk to us about this sense of responsibility that should exist amongst the elite class of society?
I'll tell you a story, and maybe this will be my final thoughts on it. 2 years ago, last year, March, I was preparing to travel to America. So I think it was the day before I traveled. So I went to the mall and I got a few things. As I was taking these things to my car, 2 kids walked up to me. These are like street kids, you see them in tattered clothes and, they just look really terrible. It's really bad. We see them all the time. We see them in traffic when we're driving and they walk up to our windows and, you don't want to have eye contact with them because, well, it's not my problem and you just gloss over it. And these 2 kids walked up to my car and they were begging me for money. And I wanted to see if I had any change, to give them. And while I was doing that, one of the kids just looked at me and it was like, chess players. And I looked at him and I was like, how did you know that? So apparently, the entire month of December, we had spent it with those kids in Jakonde. So we took them there, those kids in that slum. We're training them for the entire month. So at the end of the training, we had a tournament for them in the ghetto. So there's a ghetto in Marwa there, so we had a tournament for them. We dressed the kids up in agbada, like this with the fila, and that's why all these were a cap, and so that child, it wasn't a part of the program, but he was just watching from a distance. It was another homeless street kid in the community, but it wasn't a part of the program that we did. And he was just watching, and you heard the mantra that we teach the kids to chant that chess players observe, and I stayed with him. So when he saw me, he immediately recognized me because of the cap. And he said, chess players, expecting me to say observe, and I said observe. And he narrated that he saw me at that, tournament, in their slum, in their ghetto. And I asked him, how old are you? He said, oh, I'm 13 years old. I said, what are you doing here? He said he left home like 5 years ago. He has been on the street fending for himself. I said, why? And he said, he never knew his mom. His mom died when he was born. Then his father married someone that was very wicked. He came in from a neighboring state. And for that reason, they live in extreme poverty. And, one day his father wanted to use him for money ritual. And he just left home. And that's it. He has been on the street by himself for 5 years. And you can see his eyes, he has been thoroughly hardened by drugs, by a lot of things. You can imagine the kind of abuse that this child must have been through, trying to survive on his own. But then the story mirrors the reality of thousands of other children that we see on the street every time. Now, look at this. While I was talking to this boy, a Range Rover just drove past, and there was this lady, she just went down a window, and she was like, chess master. He's like, yeah. So she parked her car and came down from the car. And her son too came down with her. Her son must have been the same age as the boy I was talking to. The boy's name is Yusuf. And the son came down with Gucci sandals, clean boy with an American accent. His name Jaden. And this woman walked up to me and she was like, oh, I'm a fan. My son started playing chess because of you. Can I take a picture? We'll take a picture. And something happened in that moment. As I was taking a picture with the mother, our son Jaden stood just right beside Yusuf. And I could immediately see Yusuf's demeanor change, and I told him that they should introduce and shake hands. And Yusuf, because he couldn't speak English, and Jaden was like, oh, my name is Jaden. And you could see his demeanor. And this is a street kid that has been very hardened, that is very rebellious. But all of a sudden, it felt so small in that moment. And I just had an epiphany in that moment. The truth is, there's no world in which Jaden's life and Yusuf's lives collides. There's no universe that happens in Nigeria anymore. Maybe when you were younger, there were situations where maybe in the federal schools, I don't know if it's school in Nigeria, you can be in the same classroom in a public school with a governor's son.
Absolutely.
But now, that can never happen again. So the inequality is so bad that there's no social circumstance that puts Jaden and Yusuf in the same space anymore.
Twain never shall meet.
Now, so this is a real tragedy here, right? And so Jaden and the mom, they went in their car and they left, and I gave Yusuf some money and I drove off. But I couldn't stop thinking about that moment because I've spent the last 7 years of my life helping children like Yusuf. But here's the thing. This is how their trajectories would sort of like travel. Jaden is probably going to go off to, Harvard or Oxford, maybe become an engineer or a doctor and maybe come back at some point. Maybe not. Yusuf is going to become an area boy. Right? He's going to, maybe worse, even die or get caught up in some fight or become a tool in the hands of one politician, And that is what happens. And that is why we have area boys on the streets. It's not because anyone becoming an area boy as an adult. Because a child that was neglected, that went through all of losing his innocence and becoming much harder to survive on the streets becomes the area boy. Then we now complain about the effects that, these area boys are useless, they're condemned, they're good for nothing. Well, when Yusuf was a child, we didn't pay attention to him because it wasn't our problem. And I've spent the last 7 years advocating for children like Yusuf because I believe that there's nothing love cannot change. And when we see them for what they can become rather than what they are, then we take something back. And it imbues us with a sense of duty and responsibility to that child's life. right? Which is what we've done literally at Chess and Slums. And that is it, because Jaden is going to be the one that would be in a leadership position in an educated capacity to solve problems for Yusuf. But Jaden doesn't even understand the problems Yusuf has because he has never lived Yusuf's experiences. And that is the measure of any society, is what he can do for Yusuf, not what he can do for Jaden. Right? And this is where I feel like the Nigerian elite has truly, truly failed. Right? Because we've created bubbles for ourselves. You know, we have our social circles, our parties, our sports, but we've not found any meaningful way. Right? And it is easy to blame the government. And definitely the government has its terrible, terrible faults. But how about we take responsibilities for the things that we can change as well? Because for us, our idea of change is every December, you take bags of rice and you go and dump it in the slums and you feel good about yourself. But that is not enough. It is not enough for the Nigerian elite to have a heart for the poor. We must begin to have a mind for the poor. And there's a clear distinction between these two things. And until we begin to have a mind for the poor, to change things at fundamental level, at institutional level, to bring stronger institutions, to invest our money, patient capital in things that would actually move the needle, you know, at this granular level, then we're not ready for change. And we'll always keep going around the world pontificating about our successes, how we built, you know, billion-dollar companies, how we, you know, investment bankers, blah, blah, blah. Then we'll come back home, you know, and you see these things every day and you don't feel anything anymore. So the Nigerian elites must begin to feel again. And not just from a place of pity or from a disconnected place, but from a place of deep empathy to solve a problem, right? And take ownership for it as well. I'm trying my best. I'm trying to make sure every rich person I know too, that he can invest in it. This is not charity. This is an investment in the future that belongs to all of us. And we must all be so deeply involved in building that future with the same level of seriousness that we take our personal businesses. It is the only way that we're going to make it. And who is going to do this? The Nigerian elites. We have to stand up. Having 10 SUVs is not success. The big manism of like, oh, I can go anywhere, that's no success. That is small in the face of what is attainable, what is possible. Right, so I'll stop at that.
Yeah. So you lead a movement that started with nothing, really. So Tunde Onakoya, what has leadership taught you about people, about failure, about sacrifice?
Leadership is service. It's as simple as that. And even the Bible says it, that every one of you that wants to be a leader must learn to be a servant first. It's as simple as that. And I truly wish our leaders would understand that you are in service to the people, and you're not to lord over them. You're to serve them. And you know, failure is an interesting thing. I've never really considered failure as such a damning thing. I mean, it hurts. You know, when you try to do something and it doesn't work out and you've invested so much in it and you're betrayed by that outcome, you know, you expected something else and you're getting something else entirely, and it hurts, it stings. But the possibility of failure even is what makes, like, any kind of success is what makes it meaningful, right? And it is something I've always considered in all my learnings, in all the things that I've tried. I've always considered the possibility of failure, like damning failure, and to just prepare my mind and to be able to extract the right lesson from it. That is how you even get better at chess. In chess, if you don't lose, you never improve. There's just no way around it. Like every master, like the journey of every master was fully forged in all their failures. It's as simple as that. That is why, if you want to get better at chess, find someone that can beat you senselessly and play them every day until you're able to win.
Have you found that person?
Oh, of course. So that is the only way to get better at chess. And this is how I think about failure as well, like in leadership even, that you're in a position where a lot of people have faith in you, right? Because you see something that they do not see about the world, about what is possible. and people will follow you to the depths of the earth, right? Every great leader I've seen that has truly, truly inspired hope in the hearts of people. You see how people feel so strongly about them. People will follow you, but then you have one sole responsibility to them. That is like, for me, in the years of building Chess and Slums, is we've been through many cycles of failure, of success, of, every day is a struggle, of, leading the children, having to deal with the communities, having to deal with, their families, there's so many moving parts, even like having to deal with social media. So again, there are wonderful days, there are bad days. But as long as the leader knows that he must serve his people, then I think he'll be all right.
Absolutely. And on that point, what precisely, if you can recall, was 10-year-old Tunde's earliest memory of poverty? And what was that turning point between simply surviving and deciding to lead, charting the course to who you've become now?
It was a lot of things, but I think one that was maybe truly an inflection point was like in school, and they would ask me like, they would ask in class that, what do your parents do? And the other kids would say, my dad is a lawyer, an architect, or a doctor. And my own dad was a downfall driver, and my mom worked as a cleaner in the same school that I attended. So sometimes I would lie, and some other times I wouldn't just say anything. And that was the truth. The truth was, my parents had a lot of expectation that I would be the one to save our family from poverty. So it was then that it was a lot of like pressure, even from family, that your destiny is to be a doctor. So you can, because doctors are respectable, and at least there's a very linear path to success, right? So it was my destiny that that I had to become successful so I can save my family from poverty. Other kids didn't have that pressure, right? So for that reason, my dad always like pushed us to the limits. A lot of days I would go to bed without food. There were sometimes that all four of us, me, my brother, and my parents, had to share just one toothbrush. So many instances like that. But it made me know very early on that my fight was different. That if other kids were doing 10 things, I had to do 100 things. If other kids were doing 100 things, I had to do 1,000 things to make up for it. And being aware of that as a child, it helped me grow up very quickly. Right. So I'm 30 now, but the truth is, I don't have the typical experiences of a 30-year-old. It would be almost unfair to say I'm just 30, because I lived many lives, and I've had to grow up really, really early and take responsibility, for my family, for my life, for the people around me, and for my own success. Because at the end of the day, I would have no one to blame, and no one was coming to save us.
Yeah. So you've worked with children, governments, global NGOs. Who's listening, really? Do you feel that the world is really listening to the voices of African children?
Oh, absolutely not. And it's a sad reality. The world would be extremely unkind. And I tell the kids, that I mentor, see, the world will be extremely unkind to you just because, like, you even have a black skin, you're African, you're Nigerian. There's already a single story narrative about Nigerians, for example. This whole Nigerian prince, Nigerian scammer thing. So, and it's incredible, like, how ignorant these people are, right? How they perceive an entire country of 250 million people, 200 million people. Like, it is sad and sad. So you have to arm yourself with leverage, right? Because, and which goes to say that that you become truly excellent, because that is what is undeniable, right? When it comes down to the wire, the one singular metric which you'll be defined by is your ability to deliver results, right? As long as you're excellent, right, there's going to be a place for you in the world and in those rooms. And when you get that influence, look at people like Adebayo Ogunlesi, and these are Nigerians that we can be proud of.
Absolutely.
Right? These are people that have challenged the status quo and said a Nigerian can truly be excellent at that level.
Absolutely.
Right. And I'm proud to be Nigerian. Right. And the world doesn't really have plans for Nigeria or Africa. To a degree, it exploits it. It takes from it. Continues to take from it. And I'll tell you something. And just look at the trend of like immigration and things that have been happening in the world recently. There's a lot of like pushback against illegal immigration now, especially in America.
Yes.
So think about this very clearly, right? The world rejects our raw materials, which is human raw material. He's not educated, he's a refugee, he's coming through Sahara Desert, he's trying to cross the border. The world rejects it. But then it desires our educated workforce.
The refined workforce.
The refined one. You are Harvard educated or you have a first class, or it wants you to come. They have this global talent visa, this Ep5 talent visa. So come and add value to our economy. But listen, on the flip side, the world, it desires our raw materials in terms of mineral resource from the ground, the crude oil, the ginger, all of those things. And it takes it, adds value to it, and it sells it back to us. But then it rejects our finished products. Our cars. Germany is not going to buy a car from Nigeria. It rejects our finished products. What does that really tell you about what this really is the African challenge? That we export less raw materials, mineral resource, and invest more in our human capacity, in our human capital. Because therein lies our true wealth.
Absolutely.
And that in itself, is how we define our success as a people. It is when we now become inevitable. Because Europe is gradually dying out, right? And Africa would have the workforce of the future. It is going to happen. It's a numbers game.
Absolutely.
Right. So we're getting to that point. But then we have to decide that what is going to be at stake in this new world order. AI, this new emerging technologies changing the very fabric of society. What is going to be Africa's place in it? It is not going to be handed over to us. Even in NVIDIA, a single tech company is more valuable than the entire continent of over 1 billion people. Then it means right now, we are easily disposable.
Absolutely.
We haven't earned the right to matter or to sit at the table if we're just contributing 3% to global economy. Right. So it begs the question that who are we as Africans and how do we decide what our place would be in the world? Because we cannot continue to ask for respect. We have to earn it. So nobody's going to make plans for the African child. It's entirely up to us to sit down and say, what are we going to be for the African child, for the future of the children, so that they will grow up, they will be better than all of us, right? And they will make Africa matter to the world. That is the only thing that we can do right now, where everything else has failed. And if we miss that again, then we've only handed the baton over to the next generation with nothing to show for it, with nothing for them to fight with. Simple. So yes, the world has no plans for Africa, right? We need to make our own plans, and we need to fight for our children. And if we don't fight for our children with everything that we have, with all our privileges, all our resources, all our education, then it will be the saddest story of potential that never became realized.
Yeah.
And some people would joke that if they explain Nigeria to you and you understand, it means that they didn't explain it to you well. And of course the problems are there, they're evident, that they permeate through, all of the dysfunctions that we have. But then I dare say that, in the midst of all of this, that we must consider Nigeria as our own as well.